The bell tolls.
The bell tolls.
Tolls for.
That's at your house, Chris. That's your house.
Oh,
my house.
is that your
That-
grandfather clock?
Oh, man.
I'd like to call to order the City of Saugatuck City Council special meeting for June 4th, 2025. Jamie, will you call the roll?
Anderson,
Here?
Clark,
Here.
Dean,
Here.
Gardner,
Here.
Muncy,
Here.
Peterson. Here. Stan.
Here. Quorum. Any changes to the agenda? Any public comments on agenda items? Ernie, would you like to make a public comment? Thinking no? All right. Seeing none, that takes us to approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion?
Madam Mayor, I motion to approve the regular city council meeting minutes from May 27th, 2025.
Second.
Any discussion or comments? All right, it's a voice vote. All in favor, say yes.
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 Any opposed? All right, that takes us to our public hearing. So I'm going to call to order the public hearing for the budget for fiscal year 2025, 2026. And then hand it over to our city manager.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Happy to have another opportunity to discuss the budget during a more formal kind of public hearing this evening. As you likely recall, that we had a lengthy presentation back in April. And given that we do have some later attendance tonight, I think I'll probably just maybe hit some very high-level highlights, so that way I'm not repeating myself a ton from that meeting, given that we don't have more folks here, and we have had that video available. Unless there's a desire for me to be more detailed in certain areas, I'm more than happy to be. But otherwise, I think we'll maybe keep it at more of a summary level and let you know of just a few of the changes that we've also made since we met in April. But then obviously still, all the details are in the meeting packet and fully available to the public. We've had them available here at City Hall for folks that may have had an interest in coming in and reviewing those documents as well. And then, as I indicated, this presentation has been on your website, and the video from the last presentation has been on the website for several weeks now. So Jamie, do you have this packet maybe to pull up and we can kind of go through the slides here?
Which page you want to start on?
You know, I have the slides up. I don't have the,
Would you like to start on?
yep, that works. Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. All right, probably actually go to the next slide. So as you know, and we discussed, back in April, and we're kind of at the tail end now of the process that, the budgeting process is really a multi-month long process. It's not just a couple weeks. It's not just a month. It really is a lengthy process. And it really started with the community back in December into January and putting out a community survey to ask folks, hey, looking at next fiscal year, what are things that you think we should prioritize and focus on and really spend your tax dollars on? And so you took that community feedback, you met during a strategic planning session and set priorities for next fiscal year, and a copy of those priorities is within this packet. And there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of needs that we have. There's a lot of things that you wanted to focus on. And from there, Department of Public Works and Engineering took a look at some of our capital needs and infrastructure needs and updated our capital improvement plan and reviewed that with you as a council, and you approved that in February and March. And so all of your department heads essentially took all of that information, your priorities, what they think that they need to run an effective department going into next year with the service levels that we expect. And they gave me their budget recommendations, which is required by charter. The treasurer and I then, met with all of them on their recommendations, and then kind of compiled everything and then presented ultimately a budget to you at your workshop meeting, which we discussed in detail. From there, we've been available for any questions that you might have. And then today we're here to hold a formal public hearing to gather any feedback that the public may have. And then on Monday, we anticipate having this on your agenda for a potential vote. And ultimately, we need you to make a decision by the end of June in establishing what the budget will be for next fiscal year. So, all right, so next slide, we discussed, last time as well, but we can't always have it all, right? You know, some folks would love to have low density, really low taxes and all the services, but that really doesn't exist. There has to be some give and take. So services and providing for infrastructure and providing what we do in the city, it takes taxes, it takes fees. It takes some density and property values. And then obviously we, you all are always making decisions about what level of services that you want to provide and how we're going to maintain things. So next slide kind of shows the priorities that you all established and voted on and approved for next fiscal year. And this is essentially what we've developed the budget around. Next slide kind of talks about the city at a glance, and I trust all of you are well familiar with the city. One thing I failed to update, and I did for my presentation this evening, but it's wrong in your packet. We actually have more park space now. We have Saugatuck Wilds that at least has trails and an overlook deck and a conservation easement on the east end. So if you add that 170 acres, you're looking at 500 acres of park-like space that the city now has and maintains and oversees. So just want to highlight that for you. On the next slide, we made a little bit of an update to our full-time staff. We discussed with you at your last work session, and you approved at your last regular meeting an additional full-time position for the Department of Public Works to provide some administrative and project coordination assistance. So that is kind of included within the budget for next year and had been really for the last 2 years. So looking at the next slide, and this is kind of one of the most, one of the things that where we constantly try to provide some good education to the community, right? We have the city is a tax collector of a lot of taxes, and folks write that tax check to the city of Saugatuck, and they think, oh my gosh, Jimmy, had to get one person waiting to get in here, so I'll give them an opportunity here. So, yep. So we, as the city, collect a lot of taxes because people write the check to the city of Saugatuck, but the vast majority of those taxes that folks write to the city of Saugatuck does not stay with the city of Saugatuck. It simply passes through us. So we do collect an administration fee of 1% on that's allowable. But otherwise, if you have a principal residence within the city, we're actually, as a city, only keeping 33 cents of every dollar that you pay in your taxes to the city. The rest of it passes through to other taxing jurisdictions, right? The county, the fire department, your schools, your interurban transit authority, goes to a lot of other places. If you have a non-principal resident, the city is actually only keeping 23 cents of every dollar. And so there's, obviously some folks think, well, I'm a non-principal resident and I pay way more in taxes. And that's true, but all the additional taxes that those non-principal residents taxpayers pay is going to the schools. So the city's not getting anything extra, whether you're principal residents or non-principal residents. It's that 18 mills that folks pay if they're non-principal residents is going to support the schools, not the city itself. So that's.
Could I ask a question about
Sure.
that? A lot of people, I don't know if I have this correct, but when that money goes to the schools, does it go to the general school aid fund for the state and then comes back to us, or does it go directly to Saugatuck Public Schools?
Right. So my understanding is the state takes that and then they have some kind of formulas and they use the non-principal residents revenue to kind of offset some of the, state dollars that they provide. And there's a formula that they kind of work through with that. So, yeah.
We would follow up on that. Do we then pretty much get the money back that goes out, or does it go to other municipality school districts?
So the school does eventually get that amount, but they don't necessarily get as much of my understanding is at least the state education revenue that they maybe not have otherwise received if we didn't have as many non-principal residents, taxpayers.
And an interesting note, may I interrupt real quick, is with the extra money that comes from non-PREs, if we had like 12 more, like maybe it's 24 more students in our schools, we would make up that difference. So,
Even with the schools by choice, they can give up that. We don't turn anybody away at the schools. I know it's by choice. You can opt in
Yeah, I don't know about that, but if we had 24 more Saugatuck residents who were going to our schools,
Oh,
it would make up the difference that we get from actually, this is with short-term rentals on the non-PRE taxes.
Just another quick question while we're on the subject. Do we get money then back from the county for our roads, correct?
That is true. So the county does have, there's a road millage that, that the county collects. And yes, a portion of that, it's proportional to the amount of roads that we have and that sort of thing. But yes, we do get dollars back from the county on that, road millage. Very good question. Yep.
Yeah, all right, I want to go back to the Venn diagram. So the Venn diagram that was displayed earlier regarding I want stable services and
Mhm.
high tax, et
Sure.
cetera. That's not in response to any survey that's been done in the city.
Nope.
That's just a general, okay.
Yep.
As I mentioned at a previous meeting, and where I'm going with this is with the city of Saugatuck operating millage. And this has come up quite often in recent conversations. I've been on a radio show where this was discussed at length and shared some of the comparative information regarding where we place within the county with other municipalities, and we're at the lower end of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that comes up is how much control do we have over that? Two questions. One is, what's our maximum operating millage? We're not at that point because we're controlled by Headley, correct? Headley controls where if we want to increase it, it's going to be a vote of the people if we ever choose to increase it.
Yeah, so there's, a couple different layers to that. So your charter says that you can levy up to 17.5 mils, but because of the Headley rollback over time, we are maxed out to what Headley says we can levy. And right now, next year, that will be 10.1676 mils. So we are maxed out in that regard. Yes, if the community we're willing to uncap that essentially and allow that maximum to return to 17.5 mils, doesn't mean that we're going to levy that amount. But at least stops us from constantly having to roll back where we're at.
But then
And-
rollback starts again, correct?
Rollback starts again on the max.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
And the other question that has come up is, and again, I want to say thanks to everybody that's here this evening. I mean, I was one of the proponents of saying, let's do this at 6 to see if we can get a crowd here. I think the fact that we've got city employees in the council here and we have the spouse of one of our council members on here tells me that there's a lot of trust in the community in terms of how the operations of this government are going in terms of how we spend the money and so forth. So that's a positive. I'd love to have more people here to ask questions, but this tells me that we're on the right track. The thing that's come up quite often is people have asked me, is the city ever going to look at reducing their taxes? I don't know if other council members have heard that, but that's been asked of me several times over the past year. And I honestly don't know. I know there's no direct effort to do that, but I think that's something that there's some sensitivity around this community, especially not just from secondary homeowners, but from principal homeowners. I had a couple of people that have moved here recently from Chicago that were shocked at their property tax. And then I explained that's not all necessarily the city's tax, right? There's, as we're explaining here. So this is something that I think we should probably begin to talk about, maybe if there's a way to. I think we're very judicious with our spending, but when it comes to the tax rates that people pay, there seems to be increasing sensitivity around it. So and again, that's something I'd like to learn more about is how can the city, I know we're subject to the Headley restrictions. However, if the city were to choose to reduce its tax rate, that obviously results in fewer revenues, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just something that's been on my mind from constituents I've been hearing from.
I mean, if I understand everything correctly, we are lowering the tax rates on a millage basis, but the taxes are going up because property values are going up.
The property values and, it's especially the bump from pre-COVID and without, opening a wound, all of the investors snapping up our properties at premium values has really increased. I mean, and as homeowners, that's great. Our homes are worth more. But it's also really driven our property taxes up. So.
Yeah, and keep in mind, if you're somebody that's, bought your home several years ago and you've stayed in it, the increases that you've been seeing have been inflationary increases. State sets the the inflationary rate multiplier in a given year, and so your tax available value goes up by that amount, even though your actual value of your home may have gone up, dramatically higher. And then obviously we have this other side of it where we have the Hadley, rollback piece too. And so that's where, we could have a very lengthy conversation about kind of that double whammy and how that's actually challenging for a lot of municipalities and reduce revenues and that sort of thing. But doesn't mean that people don't really still feel it when you're writing that tax check. And when you've had inflationary increases for, I think this year it's at 3.1%, but the last 2 years it was 5%, right? And so that is, even though it's just inflation, that's still very real. That's 10% over 2 years, right? That and value that's gone up that, on the other side, again, then you had the Hadley rollback. So some of that, is offset. But one of the pieces that you had, we several years ago, 2009, went to the voters and said, hey, we need to do some road work. As a result of that, there was some road, some bonds that were issued, and the voters said, yep, we're willing to allow you to levy extra taxes on us to pay that back over a period of 20 years. That will be paid off and expires in 2028. So that may be the opportunity to say, well, assuming that, obviously the bonds will be paid off. We're looking to levy 1.4 on that this next year to continue to make those payments. Once they're paid off, that's just simply done unless there's a decision to ask the voters to, for, additional bonds, whether there's a request for, some sort of extra voted millage for other infrastructure needs. And maybe it's not right at 1.4, maybe it's lesser of that, but it's still at least lessens taxes, but still brings in dollars for infrastructure needs. Those are all kind of the conversations that one of your priorities was to kind of look at some ways to fund our future capital and infrastructure needs going forward. Those are all conversations that we're definitely going to have. So. The other piece of it is you also have an extra voted millage related specifically to your roads. And so next year that's expected to be levied at 1.6726 mils. And so Stevie and I, 1 mil right now with where your values are at, it's about $250,000 if you think about it that way. So if you reduce it by a mil, we lose $250,000 in revenue, just to give you a sense of kind of what we're talking about.
I appreciate us talking through this. Thank you.
One point, and this is for discussion later, but I know several of us have thought, gee, are there ways we could work with Douglas or the township to share more services like we do with the fire district? So rather than, are there efficiencies that could lower taxes for everybody if we shared some services? And, I think it might be worth it. I'm not saying consolidation, but we might be able to get some efficiencies in our operating costs if it might be worth some thought.
But with the exception of the adjustment for the money we get back on roads, we're still talking about making a change against roughly 20% of the tax bill. Is that correct?
In regards to.
Well, the actual revenues that are going to Saugatuck are roughly, I don't know, you can tell me, Ryan, what is it, 20%? It's fine.
Well, it's at least 23% if you're non-principal, right?
Okay, 20 to
Your
20.
principal residence, it's 33%.
Right.
Yep. So, yeah, I have
Right.
to look
So,
at how
yeah.
our mix. breaks.
Whatever we, yeah, it's not going to make a huge swing of the needle, right? Even if we dive heavy into the operating millage,
Yeah,
right?
that's a really good point. Yeah, since 60.
Looking at just operating, I see. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
that's a really good point. Okay. Actually, that really is a good point when people ask us that.
That's why I brought it up.
Just to say, 67 cents, I'm assuming these conversations are with PRE folks. To say, 67 cents of every dollar you pay in taxes goes away from Saugatuck in one place or another. So yes, but the only part we have control over is that 33%, which isn't to say we shouldn't look hard at that, but it's only 33 cents.
And some of that
per dollar.
33% is not controllable, right? When you're paying bonds back and
And we're
things like
paying our
that.
staff and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and we'll kind of look at, some slides coming up here to kind of show you how much we're actually going to roll back this year. And we talked about that back in April, but, so there was a decision, a request from the fire department to raise their millage rate for a year by, 0.4 mils for some needs that they have. And so, each of the respective municipalities has approved that. I think their board is scheduled to approve that too. So then you'll see kind of some, so it's always good for your constituents to know that it, like I said, obviously it's a team effort here and all these taxes, right? Everybody's kind of looking at their particular needs and requests and trying to provide a good level of service. And at the end of the day, each entity has to kind of, make their case to the folks too, but we take the brunt of it, I think, given the fact that we collect all the taxes.
And as I said, our board is talking about next year going on the ballot for interurban to get our 1 point back. So that perhaps could be an increase. We have a record support of our millage over the years. So we expect that folks will vote yes on that 1 point. So that's an increase right there that we'll see.
Looking at the next slide, it just kind of shows you what that operating millage rate looks like throughout history. And you can see that essentially continued to go down over the last several years, again, because of that heavily rollback requirement. So our operating millage rate is actually, less. We're not raising it. So it's that, value side of the equation, property tax or your taxable value side of the equation that's really where you may feel like you're paying more over times. Compared to other cities, as our Councilmember Gardner indicated, compared to other cities, Saugatuck City, what we use for just operating purposes is, on the low end compared to what a lot of other cities are actually levying for operating. So only South Haven is lower. Otherwise, Holland's higher, Allegan City's higher, Wayland's higher, Douglas is higher. Granted, we have extra voted millages outside of this. A lot of them do too. That's not that we're unique in that necessarily either. So as we look at the budget, we have several different types of funds. We have our general fund, which is basically our most flexible fund that we have available to use dollars. And unless you commit certain dollars in your general fund for certain purposes, are largely unrestricted and can be transferred out to support other needs in other funds. We have a major street and a local street fund, and there's some state, definitions as far as, what major streets are and what local streets are. And we have an Act 51 map that designates those things, but we get dollars that we'll talk about that have to be restricted and used only for certain purposes there. We have a debt service fund for those road bonds that we talked about that were issued back in 2009. New this year, we're looking to have a split water capital projects fund and a separate sewer capital projects fund. Right now, they're kind of combined into a separate fund that really needs to be separate, considering we're collecting an actual charge. I want to make sure that those funds are being used for the correct purpose. And then we have a motor pool fund, which is an internal service fund that we use to keep track of our use of vehicles and their depreciation and purchases and repairs and maintenance and all those good things. So if you look at our city revenue by fund, just to give you an idea of, okay, where are all these dollars going? Well, your general fund brings in really the most revenue. But local streets, after that, we do have local street millage dollars, and then we have those Act 51 dollars that are going into those others. But just to give you an idea on why we're going to talk so much about the general fund, because that's where a lot of your revenues are coming in at, and so that's where a lot of your expenses are coming out at. So your general fund on the next slide is made up of several different departments. And as we look at the next slide, as we talked about over the last several months, right, our main budget message this year is really taking that community survey result that said, hey, infrastructure is really what we want you to focus on. It's your top priority, and really kind of maintaining and repairing and replacing what they're seeing out there. And then it really kind of leads to a lot of projects getting done.
Yeah, back to the general fund slide. So the departments that we have listed here, are those dictated by statute? Do we have a range? Where I'm going with this is that these all seem to make sense just from my understanding of city operations, but are there other ways in which we might look at this to structure this differently to meet different needs?
Yes, we have a lot of flexibility to create different departments or split different functions off if we wanted to track them separately. Yep.
How often is that evaluated? Here at the city, I don't think that's been looked at for a while.
I'm not sure the last time that something in particular was changed. I know there used to be like a business license fund that changed, that to have that separate. So Chris sounds like maybe remembers that. Gosh, there was another one that I saw recently that's not used anymore, and you may see some of that kind of pop up in old reports here and there. But I think what we have right now in our kind of our cost centers and how they're split out, have made sense. They've, you know, and Nikki hasn't brought any like, hey, I'm really concerned that we should be tracking this separately, but certainly something we keep in mind.
Yeah, my question is not critical, just to make sure that we set the stage in terms of
Sure.
what we could do if we needed to, if we had
Certainly.
different decisions we want to make.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Certainly. Nope, spot on. Yeah, for example, like Oval Beach, for example, right? You could have Oval Beach concessions all together and combined in one, but those at some point were separated out to kind of show specifically what the concession costs were and separately what, you know, the Oval Beach operations were costing, so.
And I like that.
Yeah, it's helpful to get an idea of, especially when you're looking at the concessions to make sure we're profitable. All right, we talked about that slide. So then going on to the general fund balance, this is where we kind of talk about, okay, well, if we're gonna do a lot of project works and infrastructure and meet all of our city operational needs and provide all of our services, well, how are we gonna do that? The first thing we want to kind of take a look at is, you know, how are we looking from a savings perspective? You know, how are we looking from, you know, do we have dollars for a rainy day if there's particular issues that we're gonna have? So our audited total at the end of last fiscal year was a little over $6.2 million that we have in our savings for just our general fund. And $1 million of that was committed by a previous council to be used for future parks related needs and improvements. And that's something that as we get into the next fiscal year, we can talk about whether or not that Bald Head restroom replacement is something that you want to reduce that commitment amount for. We had the one moment, if that's all right, Russ. We had the Rose Garden that has committed dollars, and then the Spear Street launch has some leftover committed dollars. But essentially, your unassigned, really flexible amount that you can use in as far as your general fund savings is over $5 million, and your policy is that you keep at least $1 million in savings for a rainy day and unexpected issues that you might have. And so you can see that you're well above that and have dollars that are ready to put to work if there's projects and needs that we have. So
Thank you. And again, we're in a very lucky place to have this type of general fund balance, to be able to have the flexibility to identify spending that we want to do. A lot of communities are not in this position. But to the parks commitment, to the $1 million, that has been a number that has not changed in, I think, 3 or 4 years. And so I know we've talked about this. I'd like to have this come up again, maybe not tonight, but the money that was spent on the playground equipment, which was $325,000, I think, was the expense. That, in my opinion, should have been reduced from that $1 million. So the way that it looks to me right now is that there's $1 million sitting waiting to be used. But in reality, we've done projects for the parks that I think should come out of that $1 million.
So we discussed that with Plant Moran last year, and whether or not that was something that should or shouldn't be done. And from Plant Moran's perspective and their advice was that that budget that when we were paying for the playground expenses, initially we were looking to use fund balance that year to help fund a new playground. And had that happened, then yes, I think that certainly would have made a lot of sense to reduce that. But given that fiscal year, we actually didn't end up, needing to use any fund balance. We actually had a surplus, and then we were adding to our savings. They said, well, you don't need to reduce that amount. Now, you could choose to, yes, you could, but I get the perspective though. You can certainly say, well, but we use dollars on parks. We want to choose to free up and have more unassigned dollars. We've been spending some dollars on parks related purposes. We'd like to reduce our policy, our commitment of $1 million for parks and reduce that down. You certainly can do that. So.
I just real quick, I understand where you're coming from, but however, with the surplus that we have, and knowing that that's something that we had to replace anyway, it was just something to replace. It makes me feel comfortable that we still have that $1 million in there. I'll tell you why. We've got a lot of work to do on these parks. And we're going to need that for the bathroom. So we're talking about maybe having to do the stairs again now, because we've noticed there's more damage there than we thought there was. And then also, the possibility that we may not get the grant to make the updates to Village Park. We may need to dip into that so that we can make the changes that we want to there. So I understand where you're coming from, Russ, but the idea that we had an overflowing fund balance that needed to be done anyway, I'd like that to stay where it is right now.
Yeah, and I'm agreeing with Gregory on this too. The whole upper platform of Mount Bald Head is gonna cost so much money because, you know, contractors wanting to do any of the work up there is just gonna cost a pretty penny. And I know that was some of the thinking of why we're holding on to that because of the expense of the upper platform at Mount Bald Head and how much that'll end up costing.
So as we look at the
I
next,
would, so I would just take it up to a macro level and say, you know, visitors come to our place because it's this town, because we have such a beautiful parks and places to be, right? They're, if we don't maintain them, right, it's just not a smart thing to do. Now, question is $1 million a good allocation or not? I mean, we're gonna be looking at individual projects and saying, does it fit within our budget constraints that we've laid out? If we don't think they need to be done, we don't have to do them. But I think, you know, leaving good budget in for our parks is a smart thing to do. So.
all right. So next slide kind of shows you our fund balance and our savings and how it's kind of grown over the last several years. And so I have an additional piece of good news. And remember, I talked about how at the end of the last fiscal year, so fiscal year 23-24, your audited fund balance was over $6.2 million. So this year we were expecting that we would need to use about $465,000 of our savings or fund balance for this fiscal year, and largely because we're doing capital projects. We're hoping to start the Mount Bald Head restroom and maybe even start, you know, the platform. And obviously that didn't happen. So through that savings and savings in other areas, and you know, revenues coming in higher. Right now, the treasurer's you know, projecting that we may add $750,000 to our savings. So not using $460,000, but actually adding $750,000 to our fund balance. So we're not quite to the very end of the fiscal year. We still have a couple more weeks here and some final budget adjustments that we're going to be bringing forth. And then obviously we'll have to get final bills and work with the auditors to evaluate everything and close out the books. But it's looking very much like we'll have a good chunk of dollars going towards your savings at the end of this fiscal year as well. And I say that because as we look at, you know, projects being deferred and it's dollars that we're planning on spending, you know, the dollars are there. We didn't use them for other purposes. We're going to have, you know, potentially, you know, 6.9 million, right around the $7 million mark going into next fiscal year to really put to work towards these projects. And so
The
if you were
7
to,
million is as it current stands. You're saying there's an additional $750,000 potential upside to that number?
over the 6.2 where you ended last fiscal
Over
year.
the 6.2?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Got it. Now I understand.
Yep.
Thanks.
So,
Great.
so if you approve, you know, the budget that's, you know, before you, and we'll talk about what the exact numbers are and how much of the savings we're going to use, that would still leave your fund balance at the end of next fiscal year if everything was to the penny correct, you know, with, you know, over $5.4 million in your fund balance, which
So
is,
that drop in the chart could end up looking like a plateau.
so that drop really signifies, you know, an investment in a lot of projects. I mean, it's a drop, you know, for capital needs and infrastructure.
Okay.
It looks like it's steeper now because the estimated projection for adding to the fund balance for this fiscal year is higher. Initially, when I presented this to you last month, it showed that it was a little bit flatter, but that was because we were, you know, like, all right, I think we're, you know, we're not going to probably need to use fund balance. We didn't know exactly where we might end up. We had an idea, but for budgeting purposes, we're being conservative and didn't want to say, yep, we're going to add this much, you know, to your fund balance. And so it makes it look a little steeper,
Yeah,
but the net result is still good.
two dots on a chart don't make a trend anyway.
That's fair enough.
So normalized, that's 13.5% over 2 years, correct? If I look at the starting point is, because you're saying we're having an extraordinary markup this year at 6,258 because we didn't spend some money. And then I look at the decline, it's a total decline of about, what, 15%?
Oh.
13%.
Over where you're at now, yeah, I figured it, estimating, okay, where you projected the end of the year and then took it from there. And so you'll
Yes.
see that on a future slide. But yeah, if you were to take it from today's or the balance at the end of last fiscal year, yes. Yep, that number sounds right.
Well, that's probably the right way to look at it, because if your balance grew because you didn't do projects that you're
Right.
deferring to a future year, you have to kind of look at the starting point differently, so.
Mhm.
And we get some pretty big projects.
Yeah, the.
True, there's been some additional revenue and things like that that have kind of raised it too, that we weren't expecting necessarily, but.
It's better than 18%, which is, if you look at.
Yeah.
This to me is, if you look at this as a wave, we've ridden a wave. And that wave was the property taxes
Mhm.
because of the increase in the value of our properties. Two is that prior councils have been very careful about spending money on projects. And so we benefited from that, and the wave is crested. I do not think we're going to continue to see the property tax increases we've seen in the past as the city gets close. I thought the city was built out 25 years ago. So I'm shocked at places where people are putting homes, but we're relatively getting close to build out. So I think that wave that we saw is crested, and I think we're beginning to see the crest. So it's become incumbent on this council and future councils to be very careful about increased spending, because that revenue wave is, I think, over. And not being overly pessimistic, I just don't think there's another wave coming of increased revenues. So just, we've been very lucky. And so anyway, we're in a good spot to be able to make some good decisions about spending money. It's just that we can't bank on increased revenues kind of coming in the door. I mean, it's going to be minimal.
All right, so as we look more at the general fund, part of the equation, and we'll look at more details on the next slide here is fees. And so we're going to actually have a separate agenda item tonight to talk about a couple fees in particular related to short-term rentals and the water infrastructure charge that was implemented last year, and some further updates to that. But other than that, sewer infrastructure, that's kind of the other piece that we don't have dedicated dollars coming in for future infrastructure needs for the sewer side of things. And so you've actually already approved Andy Campbell with Ben Dinsky to do kind of that study for you. We've been kind of holding off on doing that work until we kind of get through the water sewer agreement, so we know what we're working with asset-wise going forward. But that's lined up to do that work over the next year or so with you, to give you an idea of whether or not we need some sort of sewer related fee to start building dollars for future infrastructure needs there. The water sewer connection tap fees haven't been updated in many, many years, back to the 90s. So they really need some updates. So again, you've already approved an agreement with a consultant to help us with that once the water sewer agreement is done. Something that we're not quite ready to bring forth yet, but we've been kind of discussing as staff our credit card fees. And so as our planning and zoning fees in particular are much higher now, and we have short-term rental licensing fees. Some folks are using credit cards to pay for those. Well, every time they use their card, it's like it is when you go to a restaurant or other places. There's real costs that we're paying on every time that card is swiped, so 2 to 3%. So that's something that we might come forth soon with some sort of request to recoup some of those costs. I think things like your Oval Beach fees, we can probably just build that in. You don't necessarily have to have a separate fee for that, but online payments is something that Nikki's also kind of exploring, like other municipalities offer, maybe in for tax payments. But again, if we're taking a credit card payment for a tax payment, I mean, you could see how the fees would add up very quickly. So we don't do that now. We only allow folks to pay, via cash or check. So that's something that we're evaluating as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't gone this or had this discussion yet, because most organizations are charging you a fee about the federal government. If you pay your taxes via credit card, there's a fee associated with it. So I think this is something that's just recognizing the environment. It would be interesting to see, or at least have an estimate once it's brought to the table, on what we think this is going to return to the city in terms of the expenses we're currently incurring because of people using their cards. I'd just like to have a sense of what that dollar is going to look like. So, thank you.
No, that makes sense.
So I'm sorry. When you were talking about Nikki, maybe doing where you can pay online, would that be like directly out of somebody's bank account, like an EFT type of thing? And do you get charged anything by doing it that way versus a credit card?
So we do some EFT teased now for tax payments. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nikki, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. ACH. No, yeah, they are ACH. So we do allow for that, but
There's
we
not
can
a
look at
fee,
that.
there's not a fee associated with that?
Nope.
Okay. So that's something somebody, like if we had that on our website, that would be a cheaper alternative for somebody instead of having to come in or send in a check. They could do it online.
We can evaluate that. I'm not sure of all the options that are out there, and if Nikki knows now, she's welcome to chime in. Otherwise, it's something that we can research.
That's fine. I was just curious if
Yep,
they
good.
charged anything to do that.
Yep, good point.
I heard you just make some reference to working it into the Oval Beach fee. I would rather have it be tacked on at the end than raising the price of the Oval Beach. I mean, to me, it's just easier to have it coming back than try to explain to people. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I wasn't, I don't think we're necessarily recommending that we have a fee increase. I think I'm kind of saying it's kind of considered already kind of built into your current fee structured, not necessarily that we're saying that you should recommending that you necessarily raise the fees. So, yep, good point. So as we look at the next slide and look at kind of just general fund revenue highlights, as we talked about earlier, the Hadley rollback is going to result in a decrease of your operating millage rate down to 10.1676, which is about a 0.4204 mils decrease, nearly 4%. We still are seeing more property tax revenue. Obviously, we had an inflationary increase on those values, and then we've had new construction, and so that new construction actually helped avoid an even greater rollback on your Hadley rollback. And you've seen the new construction around town, so some of that's starting to come onto the rolls. One area where, we have worked to really kind of improve our revenue streams and make it, really more sustainable and have folks that are kind of driving some of those costs, paying in some of those costs is in the area of planning and zoning permits. So as it relates to obtaining a short-term rental license, as it relates to applying for special land use approvals and site plans and zoning permits. We did some pretty significant updates to your planning and zoning fees that, again, hadn't been updated in several years. And so you're seeing real dollars coming from that. Interest income. So the benefit of having, the large savings that we've had is that, we've been, taking those dollars and investing them in the ways that we lawfully can. So as we kind of updated you about a few months ago, and actually your next workshop, you'll see another quarterly update on your investments. We're gaining interest on those investments. So whether it be commercial paper or CDs, some T-bills that we have in various funds, you're seeing some very real interest income. And so next year we're again estimating that we're going to bring in some pretty strong interest income. Obviously, a lot of talk out there right now about interest rates and the Fed and what it's going to do. There still will be some strong interest rates that'll help us, but maybe not quite to the extent that we've seen the last few years. Oval Beach, last year you did your increase, which has resulted in a lot more revenue there. Last year we budgeted for the Blue Star highway work to occur. $1.6 million of that project is grant funded. We took that out of this year's budget because the project didn't happen this spring as we anticipated. Now we're hoping, for next spring. So we're now bringing the dollars back into the budget and showing it as revenue. And just to give you all a sense, and you all can see it, right? $1.6 million you can see as a percentage of your general fund. If you were to pay for the Blue Star Trail project out of your savings that you've amassed, well, then you're talking about 20 to 25% of it that you'd have to use. And so you think about those dollars being returned to the community via, federal and state grants is pretty significant. On the miscellaneous donations and income front, as you discussed, we have Village Square Courts where we have a donor that's willing to put $100,000 towards some improvements there. So we have some revenue accounted for on that end. We anticipate some additional, revenue from maybe the Friends of the Blue Star Trail and the township and working through additional, engineering and tribal assessments of the project. And then hopeful that maybe the CVB and some others may put in towards holiday lighting again as well next year. So all in all, as we go through the next several slides and look at how many projects we're looking to complete next year, the net result ends up being a potential use of nearly $1.6 million in your savings, which represents about 22.5%. But again, that kind of goes back to that previous slide of looking at, okay, where have you been at? How much have we amassed? How much have we added to it over the last several years? And now we're going to put that capital to work. So to look at the other side of the equation and looking at some general fund, some appropriation highlights, this budget invests in staff, merit increases, inflationary increases. We talked at your last meeting about this budget providing some consulting and contractual support for several projects that you identified as priorities. The budget funds the additional position, full-time position for Public Works that we've had budgeted and haven't filled the last two budgets, but now are moving forward with, which, by the way, we've had a fantastic response and applicants. I think I've received over 80 applicants in like a week.
Wow.
So it's been a lot of emailing with folks and gathering documents and reviewing, but it's good, folks. That's a positive sign. File scanning is included in the budget. Legal fees, we talked a month ago that we're looking to essentially kind of hold the line on those as we're still in litigation related to the floating homes. We need to be prepared for next steps with that. Should we need a trial or need some additional legal fees to continue with that ongoing litigation. So in addition to that, we have our ongoing legal fees related to, just drafting ordinances and reviewing contracts. And right now we're continuing to update the water sewer agreement. That's taken, quite a bit of dollars the last several months. Legal does a lot of research on their various issues that arise. We use them for a lot of zoning enforcement issues that come up. Obviously, they're attending your meetings now via Zoom primarily, unless there's a need for them to be here in person. We've done that to help save the costs and kind of drive down the costs. And so we're recommending funding legal at the same levels next year. Although I think you'll see in your budget and your end of year projections next workshop meeting, that trend has gone down as well. Much less, we did have legal expenses related to the playground that kind of pushed them up or kept them higher than they even would have been if we hadn't had that.
Quick question. I read somewhere that our insurance covered a lot of that. Is that true?
So they covered the second lawsuit. Yeah. So they covered the primary costs on that. We did still have some secondary costs from our attorneys kind of coordinating with the insurance attorneys on the second lawsuit and assisting with reviewing briefs and drafting documents and keeping you all updated. First one was essentially our costs minus, I got them to agree to, I think, put in like $11,000 towards that. So planning and zoning, master plan update next year. There's dollars to still do short-term rental enforcement and inspections and use Granicus, and all of those dollars are really essentially recouped through the short-term rental licensing fees that are collected. So this is, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick, could we break down the $82,000 between looks like we basically have 3 different buckets within
Mhm.
that?
I don't
Please.
have, yes.
Am I right that 82,000 is a bucket of Granicus, contracted code
So that's
enforcement,
it.
and
Yeah, so it's a bucket on my presentation. It's broken down for you. If you look at the, and I can get you the exact page number here in
Oh,
a
okay.
second. If you look at the more detailed budget report in your packet, I can get you the page here in just a
Yes, thank you.
second. 61, all right, look at Luke's on it. So page 61 has like
okay,
all those dollars broken out by
Thank you.
how much each one of those costs. Thanks, Luke.
appreciate it. We don't need to jump to that, it just.
Perfect, okay.
Thanks.
So if we look at the next slide and kind of look at, and this is where we kind of get into, okay, what projects are we really, putting some dollars forth on? So we had the Blue Star Trail, and accounting for that project starting hopefully next spring. $1.65 million, but as we talked about, we have kind of really offsetting revenue for a lot of that at this point, from the grants, from the federal and state grants. So, the cost on that portion of it is neutral. Where it's not neutral, it's really the traffic signal at Lake and Blue Star. That was something that you all discussed last year during budget season, and then we discussed more specifically with the engineers, and there was a vote to actually at least move forward with doing some engineering on the traffic signal at Lake and Blue Star. We haven't gotten to the point of getting bids because the project's not out for bids, so we don't know what the final costs are going to be. But assuming the council's still interested in pursuing a traffic signal at Lake and Blue Star in conjunction with the Blue Star Trail project, we have to account for those dollars, at least in your budget. We tried to apply for some grant dollars last year and didn't have success, unfortunately, with that.
Yeah, thanks. I support having this in the budget. I am not sure where I stand on a traffic signal at Lake and Blue Star. And I know that there was I forget the name of the study that's done to the warrant study, I think it's called, when they go through and, what I'd like to have at some point is once we actually get to the point of having discussion on this, I know there are different levels of getting this safety issue done without spending $230,000 on an intersection that really only will need this for a limited amount of the year. So anyway, as we go forward, when this comes back for consideration, I would like to see us have different ranges of options to consider in terms of how to define the problem, number one. Number two is actually what are the different solutions available. So put that on the table.
Build a roundabout.
So is the answer. It's almost nearly impossible to make a left at that intersection, and we're not even in season yet. So, I mean, most of us locally find a different way to go that direction, but it's pretty difficult to make a left there.
I hear that from locals and from visitors, and even whether we're in season or non-season, I do
Right.
hear that from a lot of locals, that they refuse to go, I refuse to
Right.
go and take a look.
Little
Right.
prayer before you turn.
Yeah, exactly.
Further projects, small wallhead improvements. So this is where, because the project's actually going to start in the fall now, the entire cost of the restroom replacement is now included and updated in the budget that's before you. And then we're going to have some continued costs related to the engineering of the upper platform. So that work is ongoing as well. So
Clarification, you said it's ongoing, the engineering for the upper platform, so
Mhm.
that is being done now?
Yep, yep.
Replace-
Yep, it's a process that's gonna take, it's still gonna take a while. The tribes, our tribal partners asked us to kind of work with them as we go throughout further design to
Tying
kind
it
of,
with the 18th.
but yeah, yep, in a sense, yep. So it's just gonna, working through that process, they've, got some of the surveying done up there. They've talked to the Allegan Conservation District and gotten some assessments from them. But it's just, yep, it's a kind of a slow process.
So the
Yep.
walk that she wanted us to take, we can say, she knows that upper platform's gonna be taken.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
I'll report out on that in my council comments.
Invasive, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Sorry.
Invasive species treatment, we're continuing to fund milfoil, but there's also, kind of some extra dollars built in case there's other needs that are identified, or the milfoil costs come in higher than expected. City Hall interior design options. We have some dollars plugged into, we actually had some dollars plugged into this current fiscal year's budget. They were a little under where they really needed to be for the work that we need. So we got some updated numbers from our engineers on, okay, what do we really need to get? It's a good idea here of getting some options. And so Mr. Moxie updated the numbers. So I think we have a good solid proposal that if it's funded, we can move forward and at least start looking at some options. So, and cost and find out what that future project would look like. Village Square Courts, right now it's plugged in at $100,000 because that's what, we have a donor that's kind of committed to at least do some work at Village Square Courts. As you recall, we applied for grants. We get the grant and we can account for that on the revenue side and update this, expense on the project side of it as well. But we're at least planning on $100,000 of work next fiscal year. Continuing on, holiday lighting, this was something that you had all kind of included, kind of some interest in maybe even expanding holiday lighting. So one of the issues that we've kind of identified with that is that our existing electrical infrastructure that we plug our existing holiday lighting into has some needs, and we've had some failures last year and issues. And so Scott's kind of got some initial quotes on what that cost would be, and it's not cheap. It's around $75,000. But he's still working with consumers to see if maybe that they're willing to do the work and then kind of built it into our rates over time, so we wouldn't have like a huge kind of upfront shock at all cost.
That 75,000 that we're talking about electrical upgrades, is that just where we have existing lighting, or is that possible upgrades to Water Street? I know we've been talking about that for years, and And as we see, we've gotten more increased business, even off-season, on Water Street. Be really nice if we made an effort, to kind of go that direction this year. But, is that 75, is that just for the existing light path that we're on here on Butler Street and Culver?
Correct. That's just existing, I mean, essentially, if we're looking at expanding it, I think Scott's looking at maybe double for the electrical needs.
Wow.
And then the updated quote here for existing lighting is going to be about 26,000. And then we have a breakdown from Chips on how much it would be for each block. And I think we'd be looking at about this, doubling the amount for just annual cost. And then double probably for the actual
Wow.
poles themselves. Yeah.
And that would just be the cost to upgrade. That wouldn't have a estimate from Chips about that too, because that would be on top of that. If we did Water Street, then we'd have an additional cost for him to place them.
Correct. So we have those estimates. Yep. But that's not included in the
Not
budget.
this.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're looking at, if we really wanted to do both, we're looking at over $200,000 in expenditures. And of course, the electro upgrade. But then we're looking, I mean, if we were to continue doing both streets, you're talking, over 50 grand per year. A lot of money.
It's a big commitment without some others maybe also committing
I'd like to see.
for a
bigger-
while. Yeah.
I'd like to see bigger commitments from the business community, from the folks that like, we have great money that comes in, a nice donation from CVB, but seeing that we have a bigger need, maybe they might consider increasing their donation. But I would really like to see an effort with the local businesses that keep asking for it, to contribute.
Might be time for Sparkle to come back.
Oh, I remember that, yeah,
Yeah.
we used to do that.
Yeah.
Well, we'd come up back in the Sadava and Sparkle, we'd come up with 3, 4, I think one year we did $5,000, but that's compared to what we're looking at and what we want, that's just, we need more money from it.
Might listen for somebody who might want to donate at least for the electrical upgrades. Because that would be a nice way for somebody to make a mark on the community.
Sure.
We know people with deep pockets.
Mhm.
Yeah. And if we find out from consumers that they can, that they're willing to do the upgrades up front and, we don't need to, put this kind of investment at least on our existing, and we need to maybe build out infrastructure on some other streets. Maybe we can shift these dollars if we get some commitment for some others, either towards that cost or towards the expanded areas. So, just because it's not like, it says on my slide that we're planning those dollars for existing, but it doesn't mean that, the dollars can't be used for expansion if other things come in at a lower price and you're willing to move forward with an expansion. Any expansion will come to you to make for a decision. So that's
Sure.
good. Scott, do you have something to add on that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're hoping that this is a pessimistic number. I have a meeting with consumers on Friday to go around from a member of their streetlight team and kind of dial it in and just see what they're willing to do. So if they're willing, we kind of bake some numbers in there based on bringing our engineering firm in and doing some design, electrical engineering design, and getting these things up to modern code. So part of that cost too is having the professional crews come in and actually splice our outlets in directly from the power lines above too. So you need some special licensing for that. So yeah, the numbers are large, but I'm hoping then to learn a lot more on Friday.
Okay, cool.
So that'll get reported back to you.
Thank you.
So as part of the Maple Street project, resurfacing, because they're going to be in the work area already doing a lot of work. You all approved moving forward with repaving the DPW lot as well. So a portion of that cost is coming out of the general fund for that. Wayfinding and new signage, we've talked about this over several meetings now. This is the actual physical signage. If we were to get new designs, move forward with branding and say, all right, yes, we want to move forward with some wayfinding and some new park signage. We have some dollars plugged into the budget to do some of that. Culver Street lot retaining wall, Scott and his team have identified that there's some needs there along Mason Street to get that retaining wall taken care of. So he asked for some dollars to assist with that. Saugatuck Harbor Natural area, as we discussed during your master plan update, there's some signage needs, but there's also really some invasive treatment needs out there. In this case, we have the expense, but we also have a revenue source to go to from the endowment fund to reimburse. So really cost neutral on that. The chain ferry landings and arbors, Scott reviewed the arbors with you to replicate those not too long ago. There's some deeper landing needs beyond that they were able to kind of put a Band-Aid on some things to get through this season, but there's some additional needs.
So the 120,000, 17 of that is, I think that was the bid for the arbor replacement, so that leaves 103,000. Is that just gonna be in the landings, replacement of the landings themselves? Is that just, help me understand the,
Yeah, so what exists there now, it's hard to say what an exact cost would look like, but I think it would be wise of us to have engineering take a look at that, the structure itself and just how it performs and operates. So those engineering dollars are gonna add to the cost of it, and then plus whatever project they come up with to implement is also gonna be part of that, so.
yeah, well, that's RJ Peterson Engineering, so I'm sure there's some
We
opportunities-
we love it for its
opportunities to
character.
Upgrade that. Love RJ.
Just given, how iconic of a piece that is, we just wanted to bake in some extra budgetary dollars just to make sure that we're really gonna do that project justice when we present it to you.
Thank you.
So.
The good thing with that is over time, obviously we have a contract with, the Star Saugatuck folks to run the chain ferry, but we do bring in some revenue. It's not a ton of revenue and not enough to make up the $100,000 in costs anytime soon, but over several years, at least there's some dollars coming in to help offset some of those needs. Waterfront repairs, we're hoping to really get these across the finish line this spring. I don't think they received any bids with the short time frame, so I know they're kind of regrouping on that for hopefully a fall project, but still hoping to get the seawall concrete boardwalk repairs done. And then Kyle at the marina here has identified the dock master. There's some our transient docks, the pilings are in really rough shape, and he's like, hey, you guys really need to replace those. So we got a quote for it, and I told him we would look to include some dollars in the budget and look at in the off season having those taken care of. Maple Street, the sidewalk. So that's you say, okay, well, the sidewalk was supposed to be, $1 million. How come only $450,000 is showing here? So this is the general fund's contribution towards the sidewalk just in this next fiscal year. Some of the project's going to fall over 2 fiscal years, and then some of that cost is also kind of coming out of that local streets fund as well.
Ryan, where is the consulting for the parking, to study parking? Where does that come from?
Jamie goes back like 4 slides, 5 slides. Oh, one more. There you go. So I lumped it together for the presentation, but if you look at
I
the
see.
budget under council contractual, there's a line that shows like parking consultant.
you.
So, yep.
Just to follow up on that, when would we be looking at doing that?
So I'm hoping relatively soon to have a kind of a plan together to kind of present and discuss with you as a council on next steps of kind of forming a separate committee and a request for proposals to kind of seek a firm to help, gather inventory details and where you're at, and then look at several different options and how we might improve, whether that's, paid parking, whether it's additional parking in certain areas. Take a look at all of it. So,
That's great. Probably
Yeah.
sooner better than later too.
yep. I think we'll definitely be able to kick it off this summer. I think we'll be able to have somebody, proposal in place. May not be the beginning of the summer, but at least the tail end, and as it's fresh in everybody's minds, and they're like, hey, this area over here, and so.
I know this is a small part of our general fund, but I was looking for the line item, just want to make sure that we don't overlook the garden club again. Was that included in this budget?
It is, yep,
Okay,
yep,
thank you.
yep, we do have dollars built into, I think it's under DPW contractual, I think is where
Yep.
it's at. So. Either there or Parks contractual, I can't remember where, but
That's
it
it,
does have
that's
a,
it.
yeah, there's a footnote on it, yep.
Okay.
Even for me, they're all blending together as I've
Right.
gone through this like thousands of times, it seems like over the last several weeks. All right, so major and local streets. These are separate funds. So we have various funding sources that kind of help provide dollars to support our major and local streets, whether it be maintenance, snow plowing, as well as actual projects for them. So we have Act 51 dollars, which come from your state gas tax and registrations. We have county road millage dollars, which come in, and then we have local road millage dollars, which come in as well. And so that local road funded millage is looking to be reduced because of Headley to 1.6726 next year. Additional revenue we're looking and expecting for the next fiscal year is the township cost share for the Maple Street project. MDOT Category B grant, we secured a $250,000 grant towards the Maple Street project. So assuming we get the project started, we'll be able to recoup those dollars. And then this is where we're also showing some general fund transfers that we talked about in the previous project page is actually coming in as revenue into this fund to help support the sidewalk costs. And then one piece that we didn't quite touch on is we're gearing everything up for Maple Street. Next is Elizabeth Street is next on your capital improvement plan, Water Main Road. So we need to, after we get the engineering done for Maple Street, really get started on that engineering to really tee that project up for a future year as well. And so your water sewer fund really doesn't have the dollars to support just the engineering for that piece. So I'm recommending that you transfer those dollars from your general fund to help get the necessary engineering done to move that project along. And then all in all, as far as using some actual savings from these funds, major streets, we're looking to use a little bit towards that Elizabeth Street design engineering. And on the local streets side of things, we'd be looking at using close to $500,000 for the Maple Street project out of just the savings itself. So the next slide actually shows you kind of where you're at as far as fund balances and your local and major street funds. Similar to your general fund, we're looking at an increase in the local streets fund. We're projecting an increase there. And then we're very, very slight increase in your major streets fund. But your local streets where the majority of revenue is coming in at through your local road village that was voted on. So as we go towards project out of those funds, as you know, Maple Street, right? Elizabeth Street engineering, we're still planning some road resurfacing this year as well. So we're not just focused on just doing Maple Street. There's other areas that don't need water main replacement necessarily, may need some lead service line replacements. So we're going to start trying to time those at the same time. But we have $200,000 plugged in for road resurfacing, which is about what we've spent the last couple of years when you include the engineering cost. And then Park Street planning, we've applied for a grant to help offset half of this cost, but it's kind of forming those next steps and conceptual designs for how we might improve Park Street.
On the road resurfacing amount, I had asked at the last meeting that the Hoffman Street end absolutely needs to be paid attention to, like now. Would that be coming out of this? Would that be anticipating requests like that? Or do we have planned expenditures that are built into that 200,000?
So right now, I'm not aware of Scott and John having a particular list of road candidates yet. I know that their team just did quite a bit of pothole filling in that area and certainly evaluate it.
We have a couple in mind. I was down at the Hoffman Street end. That thing's been in terrible shape for a number of years. So again, we're always trying to be mindful of those underground utility needs as well. But gosh, that one's at the point where regardless of what the utility needs are underneath,
It's become a safety issue.
it is. And then also too, in the back of my mind, I'm also kind of thinking about Grant in Elizabeth Street, which is it's easily overlooked, but it's in pretty bad shape too. But again, depending on what those utility needs are underground, those are two that are on our radar, at least at the moment.
Thank you.
The road resurfacing, that's for resurfacing, that doesn't include the hot box and filling in potholes, does it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Wanted to be clear
No.
on that.
Yep, we have some additional kind of dollars just built in.
Right.
Yep. So have your water fund, you have your water infrastructure charge that has been implemented. So we're showing that revenue continuing to come in, the township's cost share for the water main replacement along Maple Street. Use of some fund balance using savings that we have in your water fund, pretty substantial chunk there towards the Maple Street project. But also kind of putting some dollars in there for some, we're going to do some lead service line replacement along Maple. So that's where a lot of your lead service line work is going to happen next year, but we may have some additional that we're able to do with the mill and fill resurfacing work. There's a gate valve here along Water Street that our engineers have recommended that get some attention. And then we talked about those further water agreement rate studies as well.
Quick question.
Sure.
we're going to get into the fee schedules later. But I remember we passed something to increase the water fee
Mhm.
for Maine. Is that on top of the MEU, the meter equivalents, or are there two different funds? That MEU was back in one of these things and it says to fund the water main lead service $20 to $23. Is that the same thing as the Cal Lake one that we were looking at, or are they two different ones?
Yeah, so the line up there that says water infrastructure fee, that's where those dollars are going. Yep, specifically to a water fund, to fund water main replacement, on Maple, additional.
Both of them, the water increase as well as the,
The increase would be in the same pot, yes, yep. On the sewer capital side of things, similar piece there. We have some tap fees that sometimes come in. We have interest on our current savings, and then the township's paying their cost share on the sewer main repairs, using some savings, and then putting those dollars to work on the Maple Street project and sewer agreement rates and rate study. On the motor pools side of things, your big purchases happened this year with your front end loader. We budgeted for a new pickup truck, which is replacing an existing truck and snowplow. But otherwise, no major purchases there. We'll probably have some revenue next year as well, because we have some equipment to actually sell off too. So in summary, as we've talked about, I think, we've built up healthy savings. And now it's really, I think, the time that you've identified, and you've heard it from your constituents, to really invest those dollars in your infrastructure needs and put that capital to work. This budget, for the most part, funds all the priorities that you identified for next year. Doesn't mean that we'll get all of them done, but we can probably get a lot of them completed and a lot of them started at least. It adequately funds your city services. It funds your day-to-day operations. It invests in infrastructure. It doesn't require any debt service, which is pretty impressive considering the amount of projects that we have planned. And really, at the end of the day, from my perspective, as your manager, really still maintains very healthy reserves for future needs as well. So that's what I have for a presentation. I know we have more work to do with the public hearing at least, and seeing if there's any public comments. I know there's a few folks that have joined since, so.
Yeah, for those who have joined since the beginning, Brian's just taken us through the budget, obviously. We're now open for public comments, starting with supporting comments. Jamie, do we want to break it into supporting, opposing?
It can be any comments.
Okay, I think, yes, you do.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, beginning with supporting comments, there are only, it looks like a couple people on Zoom. So if you'd like to make a comment, just raise your hand and identify yourself by your name and whether you're a citizen or non-citizen of the city of Saugatuck. All right, seeing no hands raised. Any opposing comments? All right. Or any general comments? All right, seeing none. Any other questions or comments from council members? All right, then we will close public comment, close council comment, and close the hearing. All right, that takes us to the discussion items. Brian, hand that over to you.
Yeah, just have on here as a discussion, if there's any other direction or questions that you might have on the budget. Otherwise, we're going to plan on teeing this up for you to vote on Monday if you're ready to move forward with approving the budget.
great. Anyone have any issues with that?
No issue with that, but I do think we need to be, and Councilmember Peterson alluded to this, I think, is that this is a lot of projects. These are a lot of work. And I think we need to be careful that we don't overwhelm our staff, that we are running close to burnout territory on this stuff. I mean, I'm just speaking from experience at my work. I mean, we go through capacity planning on a consistent basis where we work through, okay, how much time do we actually have to get things done, right? We have to keep the lights on, we have to answer the phones, we have to do the work of the day, and then the projects are on top of that. So I just mentioned this because a word of caution, I think we need to be very careful that we don't overwhelm our teams. but also that we give them things that they can be successful on. I mean, to be able to do all this in 1 year is impossible. I don't care if he had 50 people. So where I'm going with this is I think it's important, and I think I would put this on the manager, is to figure out a way in which you can work with your teams and work with the council to say, okay, here's what we can reasonably achieve during the year after we carve out our capacity for time away from work, for PTO, just all the different things of the work of the day that are going to be first priority. And then I think that'll give the team and the council a better picture and our community of what can actually be done. I see you nodding your head, so I think I'm speaking to the choir here, but I would like to see more form around this so we can say, to the question that was asked, what can we actually get done during the course of the year? And set expectations.
We've talked before, we're gonna spend a coming workshop looking at our priorities again. And part of that exercise, is sort of, how are we juggling, quarter to quarter this year into next year? So I think for council to check in, that's an opportunity for us to do that. And then rely on the manager to, flag if we're running hot and need to dial back or shift priorities. So I think that's an ongoing part. And I think our priorities framework is a great way for us to have discipline around that process.
I don't disagree with that. I'd like to go further discussion on this at the workshop. So thank you.
I just said to add to that, with the projects that we currently have and that we're working on, does it seem manageable for the next year for you? I want my employees to say, hey, you guys are asking too much, and I don't want you to feel like that, you can't say that to us, or, because we are asking a lot.
Well, I think we had some of this discussion, with you approving an additional position for Public Works, and that's gonna free up, or help, I think, considerably. And then those additional hours that Sarah was providing on a part-time basis to DPW and utilizing those hours fully here at City Hall is helping. It's gonna help. But it's gonna take time to, to onboard somebody, get them up to speed. Obviously, we have a lot of projects rolling now. And certainly, I mean, if I won't be shy if I'm like, I know it's on your priority list. It is important, but we need maybe a few more months before we get that one started, because we got to wrap up, this one. Lately it's obviously been wrapping up the budget and a lot of other needs that, were identified even just for this past fiscal year, because we're really still in the last fiscal year. But yeah, certainly I appreciate the supportive comments of staff and not wanting to burn our staff out and provide the right balance. I think that we can do a lot of these projects. I think we can start other ones. We may not necessarily get them all the way across the finish line, but I think we can start some of the planning efforts that are needed on some of them. But I think you'll see good progress, and I appreciate hearing that. Hey, come to us if you're hearing some concern, and we're all ears if we need to slow down a little.
But I think that was my concern about, when I talked about a temporary sign, is that wayfinding that was in our priorities for this year, seeing everything that we're working on. I think that we probably won't even be able to start that conversation maybe until the end of summer or fall, just because of everything in your plate right now. So I am concerned about that, and I hope that you guys don't have a problem speaking up to any of us and saying, "Hey, you're working us too hard." And then I'll be the judge of that.
They need to speak up to the manager.
Yeah, and I can't speak for the whole council. I can speak for myself. I mean, you completely have my support if you feel that something needs to be throttled back. I completely understand that. I don't want staff to burn out. But I do believe that based on what the residents are telling us, we do need to be laser focused on infrastructure. Because if doing a project is stressful, having a crisis on some of this aging infrastructure, such as what we saw over in Douglas on Ferry Street, we had a very close call just outside of the corner with a valve that failed. This stuff, I know it's not exciting to the public. I mean, we've got only a couple of people here at the hearing, but this out of sight, out of mind stuff.
Right.
Utilities.
Right.
They are frankly a ticking time bomb, and we frankly should have been investing in them long ago. And now we do have a bit of a push on our hands that we do need to push a little bit. But once again, you have my complete support. If things are getting too hot, do not be shy about telling us. I think I'm sensing the consensus among the council that we don't want anyone overworked, but I think we all know the prize here is important to avoid some unintended consequences with failing infrastructure.
I appreciate all your comments and support. Certainly. I'm glad staff's here to hear it too. So that's important. And that leads actually really quite well to probably the next topic, Mayor, if you're all right with it, the change in the city's schedule of fees, and it relates to the capital improvement charge that you have for water. And I think, well, we've had some changes in council since the last time this was discussed, so maybe I'll discuss it in a little bit more detail. But back in 2021, there was an agreement by the city and a corrective action plan submitted to the state's environmental regulators that we would submit a drinking water asset management plan and capital improvement plan for our local water infrastructure assets that we're responsible for replacing. And so in September of 2023, that asset management plan was completed and the city council approved it and it was submitted to Eagle. And so a major component of that plan was, well, how are you going to pay for the infrastructure needs that you had? And that asset management plan identified over $10 million in water infrastructure needs over the next several years. And so Andy Campbell, the consultant, said, well, at some point you may need some debt service, but you need some cash flow to either pay for debt service or also just pay cash for your actual water infrastructure needs that you have. And his recommendation was to either start with a $20 or $23 capital improvement charge for water per meter equivalent unit. And so last year you discussed it as a council. We brought a recommendation to you to at least start with that $20 per meter equivalent charge. You approved it. That's been implemented and is now on the bills. So now we're kind of in year 2 of the plan, and that plan recommended that you increase that charge by $3 per meter equivalent per year for the next several years. And so I'm bringing that increase to you as recommended by the plan that you previously approved. I have that here, and then we also have a proposed increase to the short-term rental license fees from $525 to $540 for the annual license, and from $150 to $175 for the reinspection. This is largely being driven by the increase in inspection costs from the fire department. They raised their inspection costs for each inspection by $25. So didn't pass on the entire 25 on the annual licenses. As I looked at current staffing and staffing costs and enforcement costs and then the legal costs that we had in drafting additional ordinances, we didn't quite have to pass all along the entire $25. So that's recommended fee increases at this point.
Any questions?
Just a comment, once again, it goes back to my prior comment, investing in our infrastructure is critical. If you end up with a situation where your residents cease to trust their water, it creates a vicious cycle. And then you find, I just encounter this every day in too many communities in Michigan that because they haven't invested in their infrastructure, people stop using the water. Revenue stops flowing into the water department. And as I said, it creates a vicious circle. So it's absolutely critical that we maintain residents' confidence in this critical piece of infrastructure. And so I'm supportive of both of these increases.
Other comments, questions, Joe, anything?
No, I completely agree with Council Dean. I mean, just doing the numbers, right? You got a $10 million liability sitting out there. The can has been kicked down the road for how many years? If we're accruing, whatever, $330,000 was the target. I mean, it's going to take us a long time to get to $10 million. So long way of saying there probably is a bond issue that's going to happen at some point in time because it'll be mandated by the state and common sense. So I don't, it pains me to say we have to do it because, to Council Gardner's comments, right? We have residents that are concerned about taxes. We now have millage increase for the fire department. We threw this on last year. There's still the whole issue of the sewer infrastructure that's still got to be looked at. There's some big hikes coming to the property owners. I hate to say it, but that's what I'm seeing, right? And I don't see that we have a choice.
I hate to say that too, that I agree. I mean, we've got 15 years, right? That we still have until 2040. And we've got at least $15-20 million worth of roads, I'm thinking, that's gonna have to be done in the next 15 years. I mean, that's, you do the math, I feel that it's going to increase as well.
Yeah.
But even if we spent nothing, I argue, even if we, stayed on top of our savings as much as we can. And to your remark, Russ, you're absolutely right. We do have to be smart about what we have, and we're lucky to have what we have, but with the expenditures I see in this town in the next 15 years or so, those are wise words to say, but we've got a lot to work on.
Yeah,
I
I
hope we
mean,
get 15 years.
this is not a state.
I hope we get 15.
Yeah, right.
And this isn't a state secret. The reality is the state's revolving fund for grants and loans is heavily subsidized by federal, or was heavily subsidized with federal money. There's a very strong indication that's going away. So the availability of grant and loan dollars coming via the state, that likelihood is becoming extremely low now, or lower, particularly when you overlay the environmental justice issues in the state, where there are communities that are in much worse financial straits than this community is. So I think we need to be prepared that we're going to have to be raising our own revenues to meet up the shortfall. Because I am very pessimistic about state and federal grant loan opportunities coming our way for this.
I am too, working with the interurban and hearing and staff from federal.
Yeah.
I'm very pessimistic in federal dollars in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yes.
Chris? I think a lot of what I hear though is if we do a good job and we have a good project, our voters are usually receptive to having an increase. And I think Maple Street is gonna be a big feather in our hat when that goes through, so that people can see out, they raise this money here, but look at this thing. I think that's gonna be a very positive thing for us.
So building on that, I went to the first half hour of the early Maple Street, and for the hour, an hour last night. And oh my gosh, it was so great. We had a really good turnout of residents, and they were really excited and so happy. It was sort of, they called it the 30% plan. So, but it was built out enough so they could really see. Scott was there, Ryan, John Moxie and his colleague, and it was, who would think there could be that much excitement? But people were really pumped, and they got their questions answered, and
The way they had it all laid out.
Yeah.
I was there too, and I walked in with a couple of the residents and they were excited about it. They just wanted to make sure they were gonna get some access too. And I said, do you have a driveway going onto Maple? And they said, no, you go back down one street. I said, sorry, we're not letting you in. So we're gonna do it. But John laid it out, showed where the trees were.
Yeah.
Which was a big concern. I think that was amazing. And the sidewalk, people are so excited.
people are so excited about the sidewalk. It's
Yeah.
just,
Park Street is gonna be hovering.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just a
So-
quick note, I wasn't able to go to either of them, but I want to thank you for having 2 of the meeting sessions, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. I think that was great. You guys were at both of those throughout the evening. I want to thank both of you for staying here late and working with our residents. So
great. So this will be on our agenda Monday. Great. Any further questions or comments? Okay, well, that takes us to another public comment period. This can be about anything whatsoever. Anyone online wish to make a public comment? All right, and I don't believe there was correspondence. Is that correct, Jamie?
Correct.
Okay, that takes us to council comments. Chris?
Yeah, I just want to thank the staff for the meetings that they had yesterday about Maple Street. I think that was very, very important to the people that live there and the ones that are going to have it kind of torn up for a while. And I think they were very appreciative, at least the ones I talked to were. I have to do a little bit of an apology. One of the things that I have talked about and had concerns with had to do with the staff. And I know we can't talk about HR things and we follow the chain of command. I did not realize that it was also if we had a request from a constituent that we couldn't just go to the staff person and CC Ryan. And I apologize for that. So I put the 2 of you in a bad position going to you first. So I got it now. We can't talk to staff. We can't talk to staff. I got it. Thank you.
Russ?
Yeah, thank you. Again, was, actually had a commitment with my daughter last night. I wasn't able to make the Maple Street project meeting. So sounds like I missed a really good meeting. And again, I appreciate all the staff involvement on that again. Thank you to Ryan and the staff for the budget presentation. Been around these for a few years here, and this is one of the better ones I've experienced. So I want to thank you for your effort. I know it's not easy putting this together. And getting hard questions from people is always part of the challenge. But again, thank you. The hard work and the effort put into this is evident by the results that we've seen. So I'm disappointed we don't get more people here to talk about it and the public to ask questions. I mean, that's kind of hard, but as I said earlier, this tells me that we're on the right track of people are not coming here with their, written comments and, we know how that can go. This week, there was work being done utility wise right in front of Glick's on Butler Street. Do we have any update on what that was about? I've had several people ask me.
Yeah, there's a sewer lateral that has an issue going in there, and they're trying to find where exactly the issue's at. So they had to tear the sidewalk out to try to see where the sewer line went to, because there's not real good historical records in that area. So their exploratory work is unfortunately still ongoing and may involve the street. So,
Okay.
but they've been in very close contact with John Moxie and Scott and Luke and through the permitting process on that. In fact, I just talked to the Marlows today a little bit about it as well.
Okay. Thank you. Two, as I also noticed, there was a pneumatic tube over on Howland Street in front of the Southerner last week. Was that county? Was that the city? Were we even aware it was there?
I'm not sure what it.
There was a pneumatic tube across Howland Street, which is used to count traffic.
Mhm.
It was there for about 3 or 4 days and then it disappeared. Do we even know who that was?
No.
I didn't see one there. I saw one on Gallagher.
Did you see it? Yeah, it was
One on
there
Gallagher.
for, I think, about 3 or 4 days.
Howland Street, right by the.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So normally that's put down, obviously, for some traffic count issue or concern, so just something to. Or maybe just some neighbor had one in his basement
Yeah,
and decided to
right.
try it out. So, thank you.
We had a nice conversation with one of our residents, Renee Zita, about Mount Baldhead and the steps and the upper platform. I know she reached out to all of us, and Scott and Holly and I were able to go. And lo and behold, as Scott sent us pictures, DPW showed up shortly thereafter, already planning on fixing some of the steps that were there, just a little bit behind because of the storm work that you guys were doing. So thank you. Obviously, you're doing great work keeping up on the steps and the repairs there. But obviously, it was just a good climb to see the repairs that are desperately needed around Mount Baldhead. Scott.
Well, yeah, just to echo this, I think this was, first of all, thank you to staff for an excellent budget presentation. Nicole's on. Nicole, thank you for your work on it as well. Excellent presentation, team. And I think this has been a good discussion about the visible and the invisible infrastructure. Councilmember Peterson's absolutely right. A project like Maple Street will be extremely visible, something people will be proud of. Even the things we see, when things get painted, when the lines get painted, freshens the town up, and people like that kind of stuff. That's important. But then once again, we just, as Councilman Gardner mentioned, we had an example of the invisible infrastructure, a sewer lateral that's failed. We don't know where it's going. We've had similar situations with water pipes that have been, inappropriately split, like around some of the restaurants and businesses. So I think this budget is really good because it does show things that are visible, that are important. But it also shows that we are thinking about sort of stuff that's kind of out of sight, out of mind, which makes me happy because, these things, when they do suddenly become front of mind, they can be a real crisis. So I think this was a great discussion this afternoon or this evening.
Just a thank you to the staff. I think y'all have been doing a great job, and again, thank you for your constant communication. Everybody was aware of this, should have been made aware of this public hearing today, and I like the communication and the open flow of communication that I've seen, especially within the last year or so. So I appreciate that. And then also, on a lighter note, don't forget the parade this weekend. The Pride Parade will be going through town, so and that'll be going on this weekend, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, same thing. I want to applaud the staff for taking on a huge project, putting this budget together. I think council challenged pretty much everyone to to really look deep into what needs to get done and to look very thoroughly into what it's going to cost. And I think it's reflected in the numbers that you presented very well in that presentation. And I think it's a reasonable budget. I think the next few years, I'm comforted by the fact that we have such talent, that can help us navigate through the fiscal challenges that I fear are coming. I mean, I know from our 3-4 year outlook of capital projects that Scott put together, that we still have a lot of work beyond what's currently in this plan. So, like I said, I feel comfort that, we have such talent both here on the council as well as the staff backing us to help us navigate through it. So just want to make sure everyone that you talk to gets a thanks from everyone up here at the council. Thank you.
Great. I will just add my thanks to everybody else's. It's a great budget. We've got a incredibly strong team and you've got a lot to manage and you do have council support to make sure that you're all pacing it and having some lives outside of City Hall, which is important. Saugatuck Wilds was great opening last week. I know Chris and Gregory and Lauren were there, Max. But it's such a the trails there are beautiful and it was great to spend time with the donor. It's just, that kind of generosity is just humbling. One thing I just want to flag, we got an email from Lisa Mize. They are going to provide some findings for the shoulder season strategy that they have been working on. And they want to meet with Ryan and me and a couple of others to just share about the strategy and explore potential areas of collaboration. And suggested somebody with a foot in PPW. So I would like Lauren to join both from the PPW perspective, but obviously as a council member. Would anyone else be interested? And if we have more interested, then we can accommodate, we can draw straws. There are 2 dates, June 11th or 18, and they're both at 1 p.m. So happy to include somebody else if you're interested. And you are?
I'll be gone.
Okay.
I'm happy to, if no one else, I mean, if it becomes a quorum issue, I'll defer, but I could make myself available.
Anyone else
But
interested?
at the discretion of the other council members.
I'd be happy to. I just have to double check my calendar. It's wedding season and realistically, I don't know if I can at 1 o'clock in the middle of the day.
Well, let me know and we can draw straws. Otherwise, we'll have Chris join and if that sounds fair.
No, she says she's.
No, she said she
Yeah,
could.
I'm sorry, I
Right.
wanted to.
I'm
Okay,
unavailable too,
okay.
fortunately.
Well, let me know, Gregory, and we'll draw straws.
Mm.
Joe, were you
I
interested?
think I can make one of the day. I don't think I can make the 11th, but you said the 11th and
And
One or the
18th.
other, right?
It's gonna be one of those 2 days.
it's gonna be one of those 2 days. I think the 11th I have a challenge, but otherwise.
If any of my colleagues would rather go, I'm happy to.
I'm gonna have to say no right away. I realize those are on Wednesdays,
Should we
so
do a coin flip between Joe and?
Joe, you're welcome to go.
I say they rest a little.
Okay, just need to verify calendar and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Either later tonight or
Cool.
tomorrow.
Thanks. All right. I know that wasn't really a council comment, but it saved me emails, which it's like
Like
great
twisting to me.
sometimes. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
Great job.